On this program, our legal panel has spoken at length about bail and calls and need to reform that system. Now, jails are overcrowded with people who are sent there simply because they can't afford to pay it. Many times, people lose their freedom over what turns out to be a few $100s. In New York City alone, nearly 75% of the pretrial detainees are there because they can't afford the bail. That means they could be, and often are, sent to places like Rikers, and that could change their lives forever. Now, of those people, only 8% are accused of serious crimes. When I say serious crimes, I mean things like murder, sexual abuse, or gun charges. My next guest, he runs a charity that pays bail to people who otherwise cannot afford it. Peter Goldberg is executive director of the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund, and he's kind enough to join us now. Peter, thanks for the time.
Thanks so much, Richard.
The best way to explain it is, and people may have seen the story recently in the New York Times that details this issue and a personal experience you had. Talk about that midnight call where there was a 16-year-old sitting in jail, what he was there for, and if you didn't come or your agency wasn't there, where he would have gone.
Absolutely. So the simple fact of the matter is, as you said, bail punishes and imprisons people simply because they're poor. And we see this every day. As you said, it's 75% of Rikers. It's 45,000 residents of New York City every year. So what the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund does at its root is quite simple. We pay bail for people who can't afford it. We've paid bail for 1,800 people to date. And the young man I described in the Times story, name was Devon. He had been accused of stealing sneakers from his foster brother. And he was, as he said, that was because his foster brother had stolen his Game Boy. So here you have a familial interaction between young men, and what happens is the young man was arrested, he was held behind a judge for 24 hours, and then bail was set. And because he couldn't afford $500, he would have been sent to Rikers. This tiny 16-year-old would have been sent to Rikers and ultimately given a choice of remaining in jail and fighting his case, or pleading guilty just to go home. And we see this every day in our work, and it happens across the city and across the country. Millions of people will be imprisoned this year simply based on the size of their wallet.
And Peter, lest anyone thinks the kid would have had to spend an overnight at an awful place, Rikers, we're not talking sometimes about a brief stay. We've heard horror stories from people who have literally been there, if not months, even years.
That's absolutely right. And we all know the tragic story of Khalif Browder, who spent 3 years in Rikers for a crime he did not commit simply because his family could not afford a few $1,000s. But many people are jailed because they cannot afford a few hundred. I mean, the average amount of time an individual who has $1,000 bail set, who can't afford it, they'll spend over 2 weeks in Rikers. The solution here is we need to eliminate cash bail. Cash bail will always punish poor people. Around 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 in liquid savings to pay for in the event of an emergency. Right, so this isn't something that affects a small amount of individuals. This would affect the majority of Americans who simply wouldn't have the money to buy their own freedom.
You know, Peter, I'm sure people at home are saying, wait a second here, you eliminate cash bail. And again, we're not talking for everybody, not for the significant offenders here. You're talking about, the vast majority of these cases, which are often petty larceny and stuff like that. But they say, Peter, you don't set cash bail here, they're never going to come back. They're going to run for the hills. I know one of the people quoted in this piece says, please. They can't even afford a Metro card. They're not running off to Bora Bora. Is that the reality?
The reality is people come back to court, and it's not based on the amount of money in their wallets, right? 95% of our clients have made all the required court dates, which shows that bail is unnecessary. And our clients are twice as likely to be found not guilty, to have their cases completely dismissed, simply because we hand over some money. which shows bail to be a fundamental barrier to justice. And I would say that cash bail should be eliminated even for people accused of more serious crimes. Why should the amount of money in your wallet be at all determinative of, if you will, go out and commit another crime, right? The practice should be as few people as possible should be kept in pretrial, and they should have a meaningful way to challenge their imprisonment, because we should take seriously the presumption of innocence.
You know, we've seen in Houston where a federal judge got involved and got rid of the bail system there for some of the reasons you've already said. And in California, I understand at the state Senate, they're examining that as well. This is becoming a national debate, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it ought to be. And it costs society billions of dollars a year, not to mention what it does to low-income individuals, and you have to note what it does to people of color, because people of color are always going to be disproportionately impacted because they're disproportionately targeted, arrested, prosecuted, have larger amounts of bail set. So we're really, in a way, through bail, we're destroying communities.
And again, the group you're involved in is the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund, and people can contribute if they want, and they can have a direct, you know, you give $50, you give $100, you literally can see the case that it impacted. And they were, the author of the piece was referring that people literally were there for stolen diapers. They were there for, apparently quite often you'll see things about with sneakers that are the source of why people are getting locked up, and also even things like bars of soap. So again, we put that information up there, and if people want to get involved, they can. Peter, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So Jimmy, the organization, I think it's a good one, but the broader issue of abolishing bail, you think it makes sense? Because his point is, it just depends on your pocketbook then, who gets justice and who doesn't.
You know, having been in this business for over 30 years, I completely agree that abolishing bail for these small, petty crimes and for people that don't have any warrant history and have community ties is the absolute right thing to do. We have 16 and 17-year-olds who are perishing in Rikers Island because they can't make $500 bail or $1,000 bail. I don't know if I agree that for the more serious crimes, you really do need some incentive for the defendant to appear in court. And right now, bail seems to be it. Otherwise, we're going to be paying a lot of warrant officers to be running around and
I was shocked in this story, Mayo, that nationally, forget about $2,000 or whatever, $400, 50% of this country does not have $400, excuse me, available as an emergency fund. Would the public be shocked, from folks you deal with, just how many people are sitting in jail because they don't have $400?
Absolutely. There are people that are in jail because they stole a sandwich and
well,
they don't have
$500. People literally stole diapers.
Right.
Somebody stole soap. Sneakers apparently is a big thing for kids. Who knew, right? Maybe you guys did. I didn't know. But sneakers are landing kids in jail. And sometimes it's family disputes that a parent will call the cop and they never intended, but the kid's going to sit there because they don't have the scratch.
And most of the time, these are cases where nobody contemplates jail as a resolution to the case. So now you're spending up to $168,000 for someone to sit in jail.
We, the taxpayer, mean.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
It also forces these young kids to take pleas.
That was the point he made, which was,
that is just,
you know, crazy. Coming up next, college professor under fire for speaking his mind. Now there are calls to fire him. We'll explain the situation at Evergreen State College and discuss whether free speech is getting muzzled on campuses.